Good afternoon, members. We have formed a quorum. It is also time to start the meeting. There is one item on the agenda, that is housing assistance for victims of domestic violence or sexual violence. Let's get the administration to join us.
OK， 冇問題，冇問題。OK， 先知道。
好，咁多謝。I would like to thank the officials as well as the deputations for attending today's meeting. Now, the agenda today is to discuss the housing assistance for victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. Well, after there has been a case of domestic violence or sexual violence, then it is important that the victims can have a home again. Last time we talked about the overcrowding at the shelters. I think this has to do with housing assistance. I think if housing assistance is available, then we don't need to overcrowd the shelters. Currently, the shelters have seen many victims having to stay there for more than 3 months. So if we can provide timely housing assistance, then the victims can be assisted in rebuilding their homes. We've got a paper from the administration. We understand that it has to do with compassionate rehousing. And then on top of that, there is the conditional tenancy scheme for couples waiting for the divorce procedures to be completed. And then there is also the house splitting arrangements. So other than relying on CSSA and try to get a flat in the private market, so basically if you want to get a PRH flat, then you either go through the CT or HS, house splitting or household splitting. I think without further ado, why don't we go directly to the hearing? And since we have got quite a large number of deputations. Deputations, I'm sorry, because of the tight schedule, 3 minutes each. And then just want to remind you that your statements will not be protected by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. So I'll give the floor to you, and then the admin can respond, and members may ask questions. First of all, Ms. Wu Shui-san from the Association for the Advancement of Feminism. Our association is an organization that fights for sex equality. We've been doing research work and we have been monitoring the society. We hope that we can come up with recommendations to improve the policies and laws. Domestic violence and sexual violence have always been center to the question of equality. Now, for women and the sexual minorities have always been vulnerable. We believe that by comparison, the foreign domestic helpers as well as people of different sex orientations are particularly vulnerable. Currently, we have the various units, but I'm afraid they don't have any dedicated service for the foreign domestic helpers or the sexual minorities, and therefore they have to turn to the mainstream. But then their language requirements as well as their sexual orientations, they are in fact being shut out of the mainstream mechanism. Recently, an employer was convicted for assaulting a foreign domestic helper, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Many foreign domestic helpers are in a similar plight as Ariana. That is, they couldn't get help in a timely fashion and they were forced to leave Hong Kong voluntarily. They don't have any relatives in Hong Kong. They are not able to get any accommodation. They are most in need of government help, and yet this group has not got any resources from the administration. The Federation is of the view that we need to provide regular assistance and support to the foreign domestic helpers groups so that if the foreign domestic helpers cannot get appropriate accommodation, they should be given shelter and also crisis intervention service. Foreign domestic helpers are Hong Kong citizens. They enjoy the same civic rights. Their language and their barrier may not be the same as that of the mainstream community, but it doesn't mean that their rights should be denied. And we haven't got any dedicated service like shelter and crisis intervention service for the transgender people as well as the sexual minorities. They are under a lot of pressure for coming out, especially when they are not accepted by their family members. Then they may be abused physically or emotionally. Yes, some family support centers may accept male homosexuals and some transgenders, but then the shelters are full to the capacity. They don't have a lot of options, and they find it even more difficult to get accommodation. So when it comes to sexual recognition, and there being minorities, they may be sort of isolated or alienated. And it means that at the shelters, they are subject to secondary abuse. Point is taken. You have got a paper for us, have you? We haven't. I've already received a written submission from you. No, I haven't. If I may just go to the last paragraph. Yes. We believe that for people of different sex orientation and for the transgender, they should be given dedicated service. I think we need to be sexually sensitive when it comes to allocation of resources. They are already the disadvantaged group, and they should be helped in overcoming the barriers in relation to discrimination against them. Therefore, we shouldn't allocate resources on the basis of family units. I think the groups that are referred to should be given dedicated service. Thank you. I hope you can give us your submission ASAP. Next, Ms. Leung Yi-Hua, Eva Leung from the Hong Kong Federation of Women's Centres. Last time we talked about the overcrowding at the centres, and I would like to carry out analysis in relation to this matter. There are victims who have to get stranded at the shelters for a long period of time. There are special reasons, so I won't go into the details. You can find the details in my submission. Now, for compassionate rehousing and also conditional tenancy, I'm afraid the vetting criteria are not transparent. In other words, the women don't know about the criteria, what papers are needed, how they become eligible. As a result, they have to rely on the case social workers. And then they have a lot of uncertainties. They may be asked to submit papers, and there's a lot of correspondence, and time and again they have to go to the case social worker, and there's strained relationship between the social worker and the client. I want to point out that for the social workers helping them to get housing assistance, well, I'm not talking about the assessment of application forms already submitted, rather at the stage when social workers are assessing their needs. I think there's a lot of inconsistency. Sometimes at the front line, it may only take a few months, others may take more than a year before the case can be completed. Now I want to talk about the case of a certain woman called Alan. She was subject to domestic violence with an 8-year-old son. It took a long time before the social worker would handle her case. This is because the social worker would like to assess her needs. First of all, she must have her divorce proceedings completed, and she had to wait for the judgment, and she had to wait for the custody being awarded to her in relation to the child, and it took more than a year. Means testing, property testing, residence rule, all must be complied with, and it took her only a few weeks to complete.
And the social worker asked for evidence to prove that she could get nowhere to live. So Alan had to ask real estate agents to show her the different subdivided units, not just one, but a few, to serve as record that she was not really able to afford any SDU in the urban area because she was a CSSA recipient. The money under CSSA was hardly enough, was not enough for an SDU, and after a lot of hassles, Alan had emotional problem. She had to see a doctor and then a specialist to give her recommendations. So after a few months, it's almost 2 years. And that's one of the reasons why our refuge centers are so crowded. So I have 2 suggestions. First, you should improve the transparency of the documents required, and also the criteria for compassionate housing and conditional tenancy, so that the applicants will know where they are, and so as to spare them of the emotional stress. And there should be an independent appeal mechanism. Even if a case is rejected, there should be a proper reply to tell her the reasons for rejection, so that she can make use of that mechanism to objectively consider their own situation. Thank you, Ms. Low. Next, Mr. Shamsi Gate from Rainbow Action. Thank you. From end 2011 to now, I've helped 7 transgender persons to apply for compassionate housing. They are already allocated flats, so they are fully eligible. SWD claims that they would train front-line church workers, but I don't know what training they've received. They always do something baffling. For instance, a transgender is asked to show records of trying to rent a flat. I have accompanied one to see flats, and then the real estate agent would tell me immediately that the flat was already taken out. And so the 2 transgenders felt rather humiliated. I had to spend time to counsel them. And then a social worker once said that you could just cut your hair, wear male clothing, and you can find a job. They just don't understand that a transgender undergo the operation because he or she doesn't want to be in the same gender, changing to clothing of another gender would defeat the purpose. So I don't know how many SWD social workers would believe that transgenders have housing need before how many more they are going to insult them. And some social workers are strange. They ask in my cases whether they have friends to put them up for the time being. And experience shows that so long as they could do that, they would say that they had no urgent need for rehousing. And so they will stop helping them to get compassionate rehousing. I think the issue of a sexual minority or the situation is not unique to sexual minority but to everyone, and therefore the criteria and application procedures for CL must be more transparent. There should be a center to help sexual minorities, to help them to face their challenges, and there should be more training to social workers. Thank you. Mr. Tommy Zhang from Rainbow of Hong Kong. We are so pleased that for 7 transgenders we have helped. They have successfully got compassionate rehousing. The question is, time and again, frontline social workers had little understanding of transgenders, so they are frequently humiliated, insulted, and rejected. Frontline social workers of SWD claim that they will not discriminate against transgenders. This is not really the case, not just because of not enough training, but it's because the SWD has no policy on for sexual minority at all. Domestic violence ordinance has covered sexual minorities, but it's been 5 years. There is no policy from SWD and the necessary measures and resources to set a center to help the sexual minority. And then in 2011, we asked to join the working group on domestic violence. However, we were rejected by SWD. In January this year at the meeting, we asked when homosexuals can be allowed to join the working group, but we've yet to get any reply. Last month, I chased Mr. Fung, Assistant Director of SWD, and Ms. Ma, social worker, once again. The reply I got was our request would be put to this subcommittee for discussion. You may think that the reply sounds normal, but I was really shocked because 4 years ago, on the 24th of April, Mr. Feng, the chief SWO, gave us the same reply, and that is our request would be put to the working group for its discussion. And in our meetings with Mr. Feng on several occasions, we were told that the matter was being followed up. So I was shocked to hear that 4 years down the road, we were still given the same answer, that the issue will be discussed by the working group. So please do not use further excuses and give us fake reasons. Now, if the administration agrees to let homosexuals join the working group, would members of the working group oppose? I don't think so. Now, if we can, if the working group changes name to Concern for Domestic Violence Against Heterosexuals, we would not ask to join at all. Okay? Ms. Yang Weiwei from Women Coalition of Hong Kong HKSAR. Thank you. The government's paper on CL has given no consideration to the amended domestic violence ordinance. There's been no corresponding adjustment in its policy. Now, according to the paper, CL would only attach significance on marital relationship and also the custody of children. But for victims being protected, they have different medical and social reasons for them to require CR, compassionate rehousing. They may be retired elderly elders, racial minorities, and also homosexuals. I think you should listen to the plight of homosexual victims of domestic violence. I think there are over 1,000 social workers helping people to apply for CR, have they all been received training to help victims of domestic violence that are homosexuals? We do not have any center which is gay-friendly. So how can these social workers be qualified to assess or to judge whether a victim needs CR? I seen a case where a homosexual victim had to spend a long time to convince a social worker that he was subject to great discrimination and therefore there's the need for CR. I don't think this should be put up with by victims that have already suffered a lot under domestic violence. We've asked to join the working group on domestic violence, but we were rejected many, many times. SWD has turned a blind eye and deaf ear to the suffering of homosexual victims of domestic violence. This is very unrealistic. Please start communication with gay groups as soon as possible so that we can have a policy to protect victims, homosexual victims of domestic violence. Thank you. Mr. Yang Ho-yin from the Democratic Party. Thank you. The CEDAW working group of UN has got a number of suggestions to protect women from domestic violence. For instance, support for victims and counseling for veterans. We have seen many tragedies involving domestic violence. The government has promised to make a lot of improvements, but the system is still flawed, and we've seen fatal incidents leading to deaths because of domestic violence. Now, if these families can be given timely assistance in housing, many tragedies could have been prevented. The DP asked the administration to address the urgent housing need of victims of domestic violence as soon as possible. To prevent further incidents or tragedies, the SW should do the following at once. First, there should be a review of domestic disasters. It should be something automatically. Whenever there's a tragedy, the relevant disciplines should get together and review and learn a lesson from a certain tragedy so that future incidents can be tackled more appropriately to prevent disasters. The income limit of public housing is far too low. There are many people who cannot afford private housing and yet not eligible for PRH. Means testing is the first step to get PRH. If the income or asset limit are not satisfied or not met, then people will have difficulties and their asset would be a major obstacle. I urge that we provide compassionate rehousing for victims of domestic violence, and then the criteria for conditional tenancy should also be relaxed so as to help couples that are stranded and yet not able to separate because of housing problem. DP urges the administration to ensure that frontline officers of government departments fully understand the details of CR, CT, and also household splitting, so as to provide seamless housing support for victims. 4. To provide around-the-clock support to victims of domestic violence by the police, SWD, and professionals. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yang. Mr. Zhang from the Against Elderly Abuse of Hong Kong. Thank you. At the last meeting, the government official said authoritatively that all victims of domestic violence would have a shelter. But to attest the credibility of his remarks, we have to look at real cases. Well, I've received a number of cases in the past month. In 2 cases, the couples were arranging a divorce, and they've called the police a number of times. They've approached child protection unit and also they've sought help from SWD. They have sought the assistance of legislative assistants and social workers to apply for conditional tenancy scheme. And according to SW or the social workers, they were not eligible and refused to follow up their case. So recipients, or rather the victims, had no choice but to borrow money from other family members or live in SDUs or partitioned rooms. We're told that if the situation worsens, they would have to be prostitutes. Otherwise, they could not repay the rent, the debts, and to survive. And then in one case, she went for assistance in Taiwan SWD office. She asked for a place in a singleton hostel. However, the SW told her, or the SWO told her that the colleague responsible was for the sleepless was not available, and even the characters family crisis support center was not available. This victim had no choice but to seek shelter from a community radio station, which hosts a web station which was frequently prosecuted by the government. So when it comes to CRO and also CT scheme, the administration claims that they are always useful, but as social fair workers would screen them out, saying that they are not eligible. They are not even willing to submit an application form for that.
It is only when it is reported in the papers, then the social worker will try to mend the gap. I hope there can be genuine assistance for the victims. According to our experience for compassionate rehousing and conditional tenancy, if we get recommendation from the SWD, usually the HD will act swiftly. Therefore, we hope that the Legislative Council will exercise its monitoring role so as to help such victims. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Next, from the Pathfinders, Ms. Lam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are a registered charitable organization. We want to be sure that children born in Hong Kong, as well as their mothers who are foreign domestic helpers, will not be neglected. We have had 3,200 victims being helped. Some of them have become pregnant. They have been dismissed unreasonably. Currently, we haven't got services for them. For the victims, owing to one reason or other, they don't get the help they need. First of all, they are afraid of turning to the police or other welfare groups. Second, they lack the information. They don't know what service is available and how to get help. Third, they have had poor experience in dealing with the administration. They have suffered from racial discrimination and they have been misunderstood. We hope that there will be shelter for such PWDs and their children. There are 5 recommendations. First of all, better coordination among government departments. They have problems with immigration, and they lack community support. They are afraid that they will be prosecuted, and so they suffer greatly mentally and physically. So there must be better coordination among government departments. Second, there should be an enhancement of awareness. It isn't just a matter of educating the foreign domestic helpers. Employers should also be given the education. When it comes to the planning of social services, I think we should take into account the language difference, the cultural difference, and educational background. And we need to provide training to healthcare workers, welfare workers, police, and immigration department staff so that they won't adopt a critical view when dealing with such PDWs, and there should be interpreters to help them. As a result of the language difference and cultural difference, we need to be sensitive. And fifthly, just like in the case of Ariana, when a foreign domestic helper complains against the employer, there should be accommodation for the helper so that she can assist with police investigation and be free from unnecessary harassment. And I think there can be changes to the immigration rules so as to prevent something similar happen. Well, in conclusion, the foreign domestic helpers are vulnerable to domestic violence and sexual violence. Please take the steps to make sure that they are free from such abuse. Thank you. Next, the Forthright Caucus. First of all, Mr. Yang, the Mutual Group for Victims of Domestic Violence. I'm a new arrival, and I came in August, and then in October, I was beaten up by my wife. The young children were very naughty, and so the three of us were scolded by the wife. She has been unkind to us. My son is now studying P5 and not the son of my current wife, and then my wife has also got a son from an earlier marriage. We now crowd ourselves in a very small flat. I have a head injury and I cannot go out to work. I've been forced to go out to live independently. My wife evicted us, and then I said that there was such a short notice I couldn't do that, and she beat me up, and she said that she would use violence on us if we didn't go out in time. We thought that we should be tolerant. We tried to be patient with her, and then in November 2014, she gave the final notice, and she said that we had to go, otherwise she would poison us. And she said that she would remove my sexual organ, and then my lifetime, my whole life will be ruined. When she made such threats, my mind blanked out, and then I took a lot of liquor and I collapsed. My son came home after school. He found me unconscious. I was sent to hospital for treatment, and then a social worker referred me and my two sons to a family crisis support center. We went there for 2 months, and we could no longer stay there. And then social workers referred me to a homeless persons center in Wan Chai. And then when I returned home, and then 2 muscular men came to look for me, and then the sons were very worried. They were afraid, and they would rather stay out the night in a park than staying at such a hostel. I don't know why the social workers haven't arranged for conditional tenancy for the three of us. We are victims of domestic violence. We are now in the process of divorcing my wife. I have to live on the CSSA payment for my 2 sons. Thank you, Mr. Yang. Your time is up. Next, New Arrival Women League, Ms. Yang Mei. Thank you. The League was set up more than 10 years ago. We've been serving the new arrival women. We have found that the policies are getting worse and worse. Now, under the relevant ordinance, what do you expect in relation to assistance for the new arrival women? When the new arrival women come, they go to work, and then they're not able to understand the policies of Hong Kong. Some of them are carers, and in fact, they have to go. they are just involved in house chores, and then they don't know who to turn to if they encounter a problem. They've only got a very scanty volume of guides for the immigrants. Today I was supposed to have a new arrival woman coming here to tell you about her case, but then she's suffering from a bad cold, and now she has told me that her husband has a mistress, and then the wife hasn't got anywhere to go, and they have a young son, 8 years old, and then the husband has always been very provocative. There have been a lot of quarrels, and then the day before she went to a family support center, the husband tried to threaten them with chop wounds, and then there has always been domestic violence. So even the son was afraid of the husband, and then they lived there for 20 days, and then they were advised that they couldn't stay there for a long period of time, and they were in the process of getting divorced. They didn't know what to do. So she was only given the advice that she had to go out for 1 year's time. And when she said that she didn't have any money, then she said that she could apply for CSSA. The women always took such advice, not knowing what alternatives there were. So she moved out from the shelter. Now, instead of staying in Tuen Mun, she has to go to, say, for example, To Kwao Wan, where she has got her own accommodation. But then nobody is taking care of her, so she's been staying at a subdivided unit. She has got some savings, and she would rather not apply for CSSA. So she has been self-reliant. They have been very honest. And then they have been frank, and with the divorce degree in hand, she approaches the housing department. Housing department tells her that the husband is the head of household for the PRH flat, so she can only have her name removed from the register. So no one can help her. I don't know why this has been allowed to happen. HD staff are not social workers. They don't know how much and what they need. So it seems that the social workers haven't got any clear policies to abide by. Now, the HD would only regard itself as the executive arm of the policy. So for CR, CT, etc., all such will not be applicable in the case that I referred to. So I just want to say that, yes, there may be compassionate rehousing or conditional tenancy scheme, but then you need to increase the number of flats available. Make sure frontline staff know what is available to help. For the SWD, I think there should be a hotline for the new arrivals, so that when women in such a category have nowhere to turn to, can have a dedicated hotline to ring instead of not knowing who to turn to. I'm Fang Cha-yong. I've taken a Hong Kong ID card, and I stay with my husband in a family of 6. Because of the language barrier, I've been discriminated against, and I didn't have any place to go to. I went back to Shenzhen, and then my daughter in the year 2012 had to come to Hong Kong to go to school, so I came with my daughter, and I came to my husband's home, and then he gave me $50, and I had to take up all the house chores. The family didn't treat me as a family member. My daughter went to school, and luckily I had a job. I sent my daughter to school, and then I bought the foodstuff, and then I rushed to my work. and then my mother-in-law would sometimes beat me up. When I returned at about 10, my mother-in-law went to bed. My husband would just take care of his own chores, and then sometimes I was too tired to cook. Then I just went to bed. So even when I asked my husband to help, he would say that it's my duty to take care of the daughter because it was me who decided to give birth. So it's up to him whether he would like to help or not. I was really tired. I didn't want to pick a quarrel with him, so I had always been tolerating, but I've been suffering mentally. And I asked for a divorce. The husband said that I should mind for the life of my daughter, and I never raised again the question of divorce, and I had always lived in fear and impatience. And on one occasion, my husband went crazy, and then he would cut my things and chop and try to threaten me. My daughter was afraid, and then she was trembling in my arms, and then she was dumbfounded, and she would not return home. And I had my daughter in my arms. I didn't know where to go. And since then, every night, I lived in fear and tears. And then I tried to get help. And then I was told that I needed a legal aid or a lawyer to have a divorce. And I've been suffering from mental problems, and I couldn't go back to work. And then Madam May helped me, and she has been working like a family member, supporting me, and I've seen hope, and I've become confident again. And then a year ago, I got a divorce degree, and the daughter has been given to me into my custody.
问题上，房屋处跟
The HD and SWD have been sharing the responsibility. I couldn't turn to anybody. So a year has already passed, but still my accommodation has not been resolved. I hope that I can share with you my story, and I hope you can help me somehow.
Thank you. Ms. He Pei-ming. Thank you. I am a victim of domestic violence. I'm divorced. My ex-husband was addicted to gambling. I was only given $600 per month to live with my son. I'm sorry. And I had to come to Hong Kong to ask him for the money. And then I came in March 2012. I stayed in Hong Kong to live with him, and we often quarreled because of money, and he beat up my son for release. He drove my mother away when she came to visit me for a few days, and he also drove me and my son away. So he battered me. I called the police. He was addicted to gambling. And then once we went out to some shop, I asked him for a few $100, and he hit my face and put my face on the ground, and then he kicked me and also the buggy of my son, and even the buggy broke, and my son's leg was caught. I wanted to call the police, and he said that since you have no ID card yet, no one will help you, even if you call the police. After I've arrived in Hong Kong, I knew that I could apply for a divorce, and I was given custody of my son. And I could continue to live in the interim housing with my baby. And the social worker said that we were in a very dangerous situation. She advised me to move out, but I couldn't afford it. A month afterwards, my husband fought for the custody of my son for the sake of the flat, and he frequently drove me and my son out of the flat. In September 2014, we quarreled again because we wanted to apply for public housing. He struck me with a chair. My 4-year-old boy protected me, and then he even attacked my son. So I fled into my room together with my son. I called the police for help. When the police came, they referred me to a social worker who asked me to live with my friend for 3 days. And my ex-husband keeps asking me to have sex with him a few times so that I didn't have to move out to protect my son. I did as he required. And then he deceived me. He kept hurting myself and my son. We could not sleep at night. And I am pregnant again, and my baby will be born soon. I'm so sorry, Chairman. I can't go on anymore. It's okay, Miss Ho. Miss Ho, please take a short break first. Yes, for individual cases we can follow up after this meeting, but here we may need to talk about housing assistance for such situations. But anyway, thank you very much. Ms. Yang Jingmei from the same, from concerned group for new arrivals. I've been in Hong Kong for more than 4 years. I have taken various training courses. I was once a home domestic helper and also carer in our cities. My husband is a gambling addict. He likes to quarrel with me for over trivial matters. Once he lost some money while gambling outside. He came back and asked for $1,000. I was worried that he would lose the money again, so I only promised to give him $100 per day. And he scolded me and threatened to kill me. And every 3 to 5 days, he would scold me, and he would threaten to kill me and ask me to jump from heights. And he would go on until 2 to 3 in the morning. He would turn the radio on all over throughout the day, and he liked to smoke on his bed. So I could not sleep at all. Sometimes I had to take refuge in the washroom. He abused me a number of times. We're so poor, we don't even have one electrical appliance at home. We have to boil water on our stove for taking a bath. Well, my friends gave me a refrigerator. He would not use it and dump it instead. And he frequently beat me up. So this has gone on for a few years. I near collapse. I have to seek counseling help and see a psychiatrist. I cannot sleep at night. I suffer from emotional breakdown because of this. I have called the ambulance more than once. On the last occasion, I called the ambulance again. I stayed in hospital for a few days. The medical social worker there is following up my case. I am now living in a refuge center for women. I've been there for over 4 months, and the social workers there are trying very hard to help me find housing, but to no avail. I know the SWD can offer compassionate rehousing and conditional tenancy scheme to help people like me. They can waive the 7-year rule. I hope that government departments can give me assistance as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yang. Ms. Lee Hoi Ling, Concerned Group for Domestic Violence Against Grassroots Women. Thank you. I arrived at Hong Kong in 1996. In the year 2000, I gave birth to a son, and then to meet our living expenses, I had frequent quarrels with my ex-husband, who was such an irresponsible father. He didn't care about his son. He didn't support his son, and he would work for less than 4 months in a year, and for the rest of the time he just stayed home. So I was the only one to provide for the family. My son is now 15 years old, and he was brought up by me working in a Chinese restaurant. 58 days after delivery, giving birth, I started working at a restaurant. I stood for 8 hours a day. I had to work even though I was sick, because I knew that I had to keep working in order to support my son. So I stayed in the same flat with my ex-husband for over a decade. I got no sympathy from him, and he would use violence against me and my son. And my son still rejects him, and I cannot communicate with him positively as a father and son. I've reported to the police twice to ask for help. In 2011, I stayed with my son in a friend's place for 2 weeks, and then the police referred me to a social worker for follow-up, and then we went to stay in a refuge center, but it was not convenient for my son to attend school. We stayed for more than 2 hours in 2 months in Character's Family Crisis Support Center. So we've been struggling in hardship. My son is a student, and he needs a better environment for his schoolwork. I've asked for a flat to be allocated to us many times, and many social workers have told me or have passed the buck to the housing department, which doesn't care for the stress I face. Should I collapse? Then which government department will be responsible for my son? Now, if there is indeed compassionate housing for victims of domestic violence, I should have been in a much better position now. So I urge the administration to give us assistance as soon as possible. Thank you. And I thank the ladies who have shared with us their personal experience. You've been very brave, and thank you very much for your courage. Next, Ms. Ng Wai Ling from the Labour Party. Thank you. Well, even listening to the sharing by these ladies, I was emotionally disturbed, and you can imagine how difficult it was for those ladies. A month ago, there was a meeting of this subcommittee. I'd like to ask whether the chairman has followed up. When I heard that some victims were advised to stay in restaurants that operate around the clock for the night because the refuge center was so crowded. Did you still remember that? Ms. Amlian was so furious that she said that perhaps LegCo should be a temporary refuge center for such women. Is there any follow-up on that situation? Hong Kong is an affluent society. How come we are doing so badly? after all, we should care for people's feelings. I've always said that it is not ordinary for Chinese people to come out to seek help. They will only come out to ask for help as a last resort. So we have heard about their suffering many times, and I think we should treat it as a matter of urgency. I don't really want any victim to be advised to stay in a restaurant that operates overnight for temporary shelter. And if the acts by the lecturer were not against a family member, what would have happened to him? Wouldn't he have been arrested and prosecuted? Yet he can use verbal abuse or physical violence or even weapons and attack a family member at home. What penalty or punishment do they face? I think they should for sure be punished. We should not just help victims to address their housing need only. What about the batterers? Unless we see a major incident when there was a fatal case, otherwise little would happen to the batterer. How come it is the victim who is required to leave the home and not the batterer? Well, the batterer, they have a strategy. Now, I really believe that prevention is better than cure. We should not allow the problem to continue. While we are discussing how we can take care of victims, we must do something against the batterers. Otherwise, they will abuse other women. So we must tackle the behavior or the violence of the batterers first.
Next, Mr. Tong from the Caritas Family Crisis Support Center. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have got 4 points to make. In 2014, 77 victims came to stay at Caritas, and they have been victims of domestic violence. 35 of them decided to leave their partners before leaving our shelter, but none of them could successfully get compassionate rehousing or conditional tenancy. So most of them have to stay with a friend or family, or they have to rent a flat in the private sector or make use of other hostel services. Yes, public rental housing is precious public resources. We agree that there shouldn't be any abuse, but most of the victims who come to Caritas, they are from the grassroots. So if we can provide them with housing assistance, that means they can easily make up their mind to leave the abuser. Otherwise, they may easily have to return home again. We suggest that for sheltered housing, I think there should be provision of more such space, and there should be greater publicity. And then for compassionate housing and conditional tenancy, I think a lot of departments are involved, like medical social worker, case workers, supervisors, district welfare officer, and assistant welfare officer, etc., etc. So many clients have complained that among the districts, among the departments, and among the units, there has been an inconsistency in the vetting criteria. We hope that there will be an appeals board so as to look into the rejected cases. Otherwise, we have the reviews or the appeals being heard by the decision makers themselves. Now, for those who have to rent a place on their own, I hope that the administration can frequently review the rent assistance under the CSSA and then under the Community Care Fund and under other mechanisms. I hope you can help them, because sometimes the CSSA may not be able to provide adequate help. The rent assistance given is a far cry from the actual rental levels in the private market. Charities helps with victims of family tragedies and also victims of poor family relationship. Now we have mainstream families. We've also got same-sex co-inhabitants. They all need our help. There is a site next to our support center which has been given to us for temporary recreational users. Now, we have seen that so many victims of abuse are stranded in the shelters and the support centers, and as a result, new clients cannot come. So I just wonder if the administration can reconsider our request, that is, expand our center so that we can accommodate 20 male victims or sexual minorities, because indeed the facilities are inadequate. Next, Ms. Chen Xiongmui from Harmony House. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Harmony House is an NGO, a welfare organization dealing with domestic violence. Between January and December 2014, 216 left us, and then 153 didn't go home to reunite with their husbands. And for the remaining 63 women who returned home to reunite with their husbands, 40% went home because they were worried that after leaving their bachelors, they might not have a permanent home. So we can see that the women who have suffered from domestic violence are worried about their accommodation. We have got the following points to make. First of all, for compassionate rehousing and conditional tenancy scheme, most women cannot differentiate between the two. When they apply for conditional tenancy because of domestic violence, they have to supplement their case with medical reasons in addition to a social reason. They don't know why in some cases the social ground is adequate, while they may have to provide medical evidence as well. So we've seen inconsistency in the vetting criteria. And then there was a case in which a woman had to wait for 9 months, and it has caused a lot of anxiety on her part. So we hope that we should enhance the awareness of the CR and the CT. There should be greater transparency. There should be consistency in the vetting. Now, for household splitting. Now, for women who would like to get a divorce, and if they are in a PRH household, usually they're advised to have household splitting. Usually they frequently get the custodial right of their children. So in this way, the bachelor will lose the flat, and in this case, the bachelor will take it out on the women, and then this will give rise to further crisis. So usually, when they are asked to apply for household splitting, they're really worried, and it also takes a long time, and therefore victims have to wait for the finalization, and they have to stay in a shelter, sometimes as long as a year's time. In other words, they have to stay at a shelter for a long time, and their daily life will be affected. So we are suggesting that for similar cases, we should avoid household splitting as much as possible. In this way, there should be compassionate rehousing rather than splitting, and we can avoid straining the relationship between the bachelor and the victim further. Now, given the high rental levels today, In other words, many victims have to make use of the standard payments before they can get a subdivided unit in a remote corner. If you want to stay in the urban area, you can't really get one. Therefore, we suggest that there should be a review of the rent assistance so as to help the victims to overcome the long-term housing problem. Fourthly, for other alternative housing options for the women, they may be able to go to a singleton hostel or family hostel, but usually you have to wait for 9 months or more before it gets to your turn, and it's not permanent housing. So there should be more resources in other channels so as to help them for the on their long-term housing needs. Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Tang from Hong Kong Council Social Service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the question of housing assistance, we'd like to raise 4 points. First of all, I'm grateful to the women who spoke before me. They have been most courageous in telling us their stories. I think we all have a heavy heart. Housing isn't a matter of having a sea view or living on the peak, and it isn't a matter that can wait. We have to resolve the problem today. If every day you have to worry about your accommodation and you don't know where you're going to spend the night, I don't think it is good. It is a real issue, and it is an imminent issue. We have already got a submission for you, so let me elaborate on the 4 points. First of all, even for a subdivided unit in the Northern District, it takes you a few $1,000s, and also the rate of increase is alarming by 1/3, one quarter in a few years' time, and we do have such a drastic increase on our wage levels. So please don't expect them to find a home in the private sector. It is not easy at all. And then secondly, there's no way out for the women. Now, for conditional tenancy, there are a number of problems. It lacks transparency when it comes to vetting. On the 29th of February 2013, an SWD submitted a paper to the LegCo. Mention is made about compassionate rehousing. It is said that social workers have got sufficient guidelines to vet the cases, and the SWD has also provided training. But then, there is one on child abuse, and the other is about battered spouse. No details have been given. Paragraph 9.8 in the paper on battered spouse, it talks about procedures and guidelines. I think you would all turn your heads and wonder what this is about. Even if I try to look for it on the internet, I can't find it. So I just wondered if social workers are getting enough assistance. So please help. And then the procedural guides lack transparency. I think a victim has to undergo repetitive vetting and has been asked to submit papers again and again. This is undesirable. And then the SWD has also said that the district officer will be responsible for vetting. When all the papers are ready, then there will be a decision in 6 weeks' time. I think the relevant officials will be posted out regularly, and then circumstances may also change over time. In our shelter, we have victims from different districts, and they will try to compare notes, they will try to exchange views, and they found that there has been inconsistencies. I think this is not good because it will create a very bad impression or perception on the part of the clients. If they're not satisfied, they will try to lodge an appeal, but there isn't a proper mechanism. The case simply goes back to the original officer. Well, to be fair, just now we have heard the painful stories of a few ladies, and can we expect the original decision maker revoking their own decisions? Sometimes you have to go outside the mechanism to seek help. So the criteria are not transparent, and also the yardsticks are different. And then there have been a lot of information being sort of shared. So it will only increase the conflict and confrontation, and it is a lose-lose situation. First of all, there are very different views concerning what makes a case of compassionate rehousing. So why don't you sort of upload a form? Anybody who wants it can fill it out, and then you submit the form, and if it is a rejected case, return it to the client and giving a reason, and then establish an appeals mechanism so as to resolve the problem. Thank you. I'd like to thank the 18 deputations who have come directly to put their case to us. We have heard that be it compassionate rehousing or conditional tenancy scheme, we need to enhance the transparency of the vetting process and the criteria and the procedures. They have to be made more explicit. Just now, Mr. Tang referred to some guidelines for the procedures of compassionate rehousing and conditional tenancy scheme. We can't find it in the public domain. Can you not make it transparent? Is it possible to have an independent appeals mechanism? And then for sexual minorities and for the foreign domestic helpers, can you not provide dedicated service, and can you not be more sensitive? In particular, for the minorities, I think they have been fighting for inclusion in the working group on combating violence. Maybe the department can try to give an answer. Mr. Siu.
Thank you. Perhaps I should first make an overall response to the policy, and regarding the operation, I will defer to my SWT colleagues to supplement. First of all, I thank you, Chairman, for arranging this small meeting so that we can listen to the stories from individual stakeholders and also concerned groups. First, for some of the ladies here, if you have cases, you can pass them to SWT colleagues after the meeting, and then they will see whether there is anything that can be done, or to see whether there is any inconsistency with the current criteria and procedures. May I first point out a few things? First, compassionate rehousing is for people with special and genuine, urgent and long-term housing needs, but do not have the means to resolve them on their own, including victims of domestic violence or sexual violence. Every year, the Housing Department reserves 2,000 flats in the government's PRH allocation plan. Now, this is just for reference. It is not the ceiling. I've checked previous statistics very often. The flats would reach 2,400 or so in number. And we have certainly not given any indicator for our frontline social workers whether the cases are approved would depend on the actual situation. But as the representative from Characters Family Crisis Support Center said, public housing is a valuable social resource, and we have to be very careful. When it comes to CL and CT scheme, we do not have a mechanical way of consideration. It really depends on the circumstances of the case. For instance, we consider whether there is any medical grounds on the part of the applicant or his family members. We also take into account social factors such as the housing conditions and family situation of the applicant, disposable income and assets and family support network available to the victim, and also the psychological trauma suffered by the victim. So we rely on the professional judgment of social workers concerned. The processing time of cases may differ, but as far as the procedural guidelines are concerned, for cases handled by SWT, on average, a referral can be made within 40 days. And if the victim doesn't specify a certain PRH development, usually flats can be allocated within even up to 2 days. The SW and also the HD would accord priority to victims of domestic violence. Some deputations talked about the criteria and their transparency. Indeed, we have to consider the actual circumstances of a case. There is no mechanical way of dealing with it. And we do have the vetting criteria, and they can be seen on the website and also pamphlets. And there are also procedural guidelines to follow. All social worker and also the organizations concerned have to follow the established procedures. The SWT also have regular meetings with the NGOs, and we also offer regular trainings to ensure consistency of criteria. And as we all know, such a vetting of such cases is usually done by the district SWO, social welfare officer, and for very special cases, approval by a more senior rank of officer is needed. And as for an appeal mechanism, under the conditions of contract with NGOs, all of them must have an appeal mechanism. When there is any complaint, then an officer of higher rank should be tasked to deal with the appeals. And complaints can also be made to the Complaints Committee of Lump Sum Grant. So SWT will certainly take such complaints very seriously. Can we improve the transparency of our criteria and appeal mechanism? For sure, we are willing to do so. The SWT and NGOs have liaison mechanism with their headquarters and district offices. We are willing to pass on your views to these organizations for consideration. Some of the remarks made by deputations here today may involve foreign domestic helpers. I will refer these remarks to the police or the immigration department as appropriate. Now I invite HD and SWT to supplement on operational aspects. Speaker was off mic. Mr. Phil. Thank you, Chairman. The Undersecretary has more or less outlined to you the situation. For all applications for housing assistance, we have our established mechanisms and standardized procedural guidelines. When social workers first join the SWT or when they are posted to MSW post or family social welfare center or for child protection unit, they will be refreshed of these guidelines, and their senior officer will serve as a supervisor in all cases. Because our service targets are human beings and each case is different, even though for 4P families, they may be treated differently with different considerations. So the SWO concerned will discuss with an applicant in great details to assess the actual need. And as for not so desirable cases mentioned by the deputations here, we appeal to you to give us information after this meeting. We are not penalizing our colleagues, but we want to understand what's really the matter, and we want to be forward-looking and improve our quality of service. NGOs are just like SWDs. The social workers are professionally trained, and training by the SWT is offered to NGOs as well. Every year, there are 7,000 social workers receiving our training. As for ethnic minorities and sexual minorities, we have theme seminars to let our frontline social workers better understand the situation. A few deputations mentioned the hotline for new arrivals. Starting from 2009, we've already emerged our hotline of the SWT and for the new arrivals. So when you call our hotline, there will be automatic referral to our hotline for new arrivals. And in 2012, we set up a service team at Lo Wu for cross-boundary families and new arrivals. We provide support and referral services to them. We also pass on to them information on where to seek help in case of domestic violence. NGOs also use non-SWT provided resources to set up support centers in Shenzhen and Guangzhou to provide information to families who are planning to reunite in Hong Kong or to send their children to study in Hong Kong, so that when they are in any hardship, they know where to get help. We've got 65 integrated family centers, some managed by SWT, some by NGOs. They are widely distributed in the whole of Hong Kong, and information for new arrivals is also available there. HKSAR talked about the guidelines and procedures for applying for housing assistance. Can that be made available to us? These are guidelines for social welfare officers or social workers of NGOs and SWDs. Many organizations, including NGOs, shelters, and people who assist the victims, said that it was hard to follow your procedures. They do not know the procedures and the criteria well, and I believe the guidelines are rather explicit on these things. So is there any need to keep that document confidential? If not, can it be disclosed and published? All right, we will. I'll go back and see. So you don't feel that there's a need to keep the document confidential? Because it involves procedures between government departments, and there are only procedures followed by our frontline colleagues. And as I said, each case is unique. Such guidelines are just for reference for our colleagues. They don't have to stick to the time frame specified in the guidelines. So can we have the guidelines for reference to? All right, I will get back to you after I've checked internally. Any supplements from the Housing Department? As said by Mr. Stephen Seal, people think that there is a ceiling for compassionate rehousing, 2,000 flats per year. In fact, that is not the case. It's just a target. So if need be, we can allocate more than 2,000 flats under the CR plan. As far as I understand, there has been no change to this number, 2,000, since the reunification. It depends on the supply of public housing. Is it 2,000 for every year? Sometimes it's over that. About 10 years ago, there were 30,000 flats available. It was 2,000. Now we've only got 20,000 flats per year, but the flat number is still 2,000. So we are trying to provide as many as possible when there is an actual need. There is no cap at all. We have more new arrivals, a higher divorce rate, and domestic violence is more prevalent. I envisage that there will be a greater demand for flats under CR. Yet, for so many years, it's been capped at 2,000. This is a bit strange. But anyway, I'll leave time for colleagues to follow up.
4位啦。
Four members would like to speak. 4 minutes each. Helena Wong, Raymond Chen, Zhang Guokchu, and then Emily Lau and KK Kwok. I'd like to thank the deputations for telling us what you think about the issue. I didn't quite make it out as to what has been said by the officials in their reply, because there have been allegations that there have been inconsistencies and then there is a lack of transparency. You have asked for the cases to be referred to you, but then I want to know if the SWD agrees that there is a set of clear guidelines for the vetting of CR cases and CT cases. Whoever has more tiers or whoever has a more influential LegCo member writing a letter to help would get the housing or not. Can you not be more explicit about the guidelines? They have the guidelines, but that's for internal use. Do you deliberately hold it back from us or what? Yes, indeed, we have the guidelines. Quite a thick volume. To answer Dr. Wong's question, well, we are dealing with human beings. Each and every case is different. It will be impossible for us to sort of generalize. There was an idea to have a points system, but then we can't be that mechanical. Of course, there are a few criterion. Income, access, are the resources available, family support, number of years staying in Hong Kong. because after all, CR is also a policy to allocate PRH flats. Therefore, basically, we have to follow the policies of the Housing Department. Having considered all the information, the social workers will exercise professional judgment. And then if it is believed that there is a need in that case, and if consideration has been given to other factors, then social worker will come to a professional judgment. They have guidelines. They know more or less what information will be needed. We would like to know about the circumstances of the victims. Each and every case will be different, but basically we have to assess the assets. And in this booklet, we have got the broad principles. For the details, social workers' professionalism will be critical. Every year, we provide training to our professional social workers so that they can get refresher courses and they can be more sensitive. We have got liaison groups with NGO representatives as members. Whenever we encounter unique cases, we will have a discussion, and even at the headquarters level, once every 6 months, we, together with the Housing Department, Hong Kong CSS, and also welfare organizations providing service in this field, will have a discussion about housing assistance on all fronts and try to find out how we can carry out improvements. We have had 8 meetings. I'm glad to report that we have been able to streamline the procedures. Well, you have been going on for 2 minutes, but still you have been very general. Basically, you haven't given us the specifics. What's important is that you show us the guidelines. The guidelines are, after all, guidelines. You're right to say that every case is unique, but still we want to know that there is a set of guidelines to follow, and then it will enhance the transparency. Yes, he did refer to a leaflet. So either you have a leaflet or you have the thick volume. In either case, we'll be interested to have a look. Dr. Helena Wong, I think the guidelines should be made public. I don't see why the guidelines should be kept confidential unless we are talking about privacy, but I cannot imagine that there is any privacy involved, and I don't think it is a matter of state secrets. Even LegCo members don't have a copy. So please remember that this is our request, so please make it public as soon as possible. Mr. Tankabio. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For women who need help and for others who need help, especially those who have children with them, they apply for conditional tenancy and yet their application is turned down. At the same time, they know that there is a ward office of the LegCo member in their constituency. They will turn to LegCo members for help, or they will come here to lodge a complaint with our complaints division. I have had this experience. We don't want to exert pressure on them, relying on writing a letter or two or calling a press conference before we get it. I'm also a registered social worker. By having this approach, the original caseworker would think that we are exerting political pressure on him. But then we find that we are sympathetic towards a particular case, and we find that it is a very vulnerable case. I think the chair would agree with me that we are not trying to turn ineligible cases into eligible cases. I'm sure the SWD would regard the Hong Kong Council Social Services, Characters, and Harmony House as their partners. I think at least at this level, you should set up an appeals mechanism so that those who are concerned about the ethnic minorities, the sexual minorities, etc., they can then have a fresh look of the cases. In this way, their decision will be authoritative and credible, and then we don't need to intervene. I think in this way, you can strike a balance. Of course, the best way is to provide more PRH flats instead of capping it at 2,000. We have 4,000. I think everybody can tell you that that's the answer. We need to improve the mechanism so that while you follow the guidelines, we also look at all the factors involved. Well, otherwise, people get the impression that a rejected case, with the help of a lawmaker, it will be given assistance. So sometimes we may doubt whether the assessment is professional enough. If you don't even have an appeal board, then I'm afraid that the dissatisfaction would just last. Appeal mechanism. Mr. Fung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tang. Just now, Mr. Tang referred to a phenomenon. I'm afraid I have to speak up on behalf of our social workers. Sometimes pressure groups, district council members, LegCo members have intervened, and usually additional information will be given. With the additional information, the case social worker can be assisted in re-examining the case, and then the client at a press conference may also give additional information. Why don't you focus on the appeal mechanism? So it isn't simply because somebody intervenes and so the social worker changes his mind. As to the idea of having an appeal mechanism for the clients, if they are not happy with the decision of the social welfare department, in fact, there are a number of tiers of appeal. You can go all the way up to the Director of Social Welfare. We are talking about an independent appeal mechanism. Currently, there is already a mechanism for the NGOs. If you talk about an independent mechanism, it may take time. I think let's go back and reconsider it. Currently, there's a mechanism to decide on the cases. Well, it isn't just because Deng Ka-biu or the chair are asking for this. Now, even the service organizations that you have trust in are also making the same request. Maybe after this round of exchanges, the trust will be lost. As you have said, the service organizations are our trustworthy partners. They have made very good points. On other occasions, when we talked with the service organizations, it seems that they have seldom asked for an independent appeal mechanism. So you need time to digest the idea. Mr. Raymond Chen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, for today, we are talking about housing assistance. But then for the sexual minorities who attended, they are more concerned about when they will be allowed to join the working group on combating violence, because it will be decisive on the allocation of resources. So, SWD, has the working group ever considered the issue? If the answer is in the affirmative, when was it included in the agenda? How many working group members were against the idea? Or it is you on your own think that it is not yet the right time, and therefore you have never raised the issue with the working group? So if the idea has been rejected, would you talk about it again? I think every time they come, they will make the same point. Now, Rainbow Hong Kong has said that for the 7 cases that they have given help, they've all been able to get housing. But they can see that social workers have misunderstanding and there has been bias, and sometimes there have been insults and discrimination. We have been told that the training, there is dedicated training for this purpose, but will it just be for an hour or 2, or does it mean that all social workers dealing with domestic violence receive such training? If you make all social workers to attend an hour or 2's training, it won't generate any effects. It is unrealistic to expect everybody to know about it. For transgender people, when you try to help them, on what is the basis of the sex? Now, would it be the sex indicated on the ID card or not? Now, some people have been told that they should cut their hair and change back into the male costume, and then they could get a flat. So I want to know whether the SWD has provided training in providing services to the transgender individuals. For sexual minorities and the transgender individuals, regularly we have been providing training to the SWD as well as the NGOs. For the past 3 years, there have been 8 dedicated training sessions covering 450 social workers. Of course, for induction training, we have also included the topic of helping the sexual minorities and the transgender persons so that our colleagues can be more sensitive to the needs and ways to handle their cases. Now, coming back to Mr. Chen's question, I think I have had liaison with the 3 gentlemen, and the 2 gentlemen from Rainbow Action, Rainbow Hong Kong, as well as the representative of Women Coalition of Hong Kong, HKSAR. We have always been talking to the NGOs on matters of concern to both. As to the membership of the working group combating violence, around about May this year, we are going to give a clear reply on this matter. Thank you.
Chairman, he didn't answer me directly as to whether the working group has discussed this or not, and whether there are any problems. So shall we wait until they come back to us in May? And what about the thematic training program? Did the social workers join on a voluntary basis, and what are the topics? Can you give us some more information? Domestic violence and sex violence against ethnic minorities. I think we may have to go deeper into this topic later. Theoretically, in theory, you should allow sexual minority groups to join the working group. So in May, when you come back, you apply to us, should be the number of representatives allowed. Well, in May, we'll give definite answer to the subcommittee. So you will tell us the number of organizations that can be allowed. That is one of the answers. All right, then we look forward to your reply in May. Mr. John Kwok-Chu. Thank you, Chairman. I think this afternoon we don't have too many frontline colleagues. I think they are caught in the middle. They are professional social workers and they are also case workers, and they have to consider the cases on their own merits. There are also gatekeepers of resources. They may be social workers serving the government or NGOs. Regardless of the position, they have to work as gatekeepers of resources or in making decision whether approval can be granted. Of course, the administration will say that it is up to their professional judgment, but obviously these colleagues have their supervisors, and their supervisors have their supervisors. And if it is NGO, then there is also district social welfare officer to have the final say. I've got cases where the social workers believed that they were meritorious, and yet after several rounds these cases were rejected. And there were also cases which they believed not eligible, but then perhaps after a few rounds these cases were approved for whatever reasons. So I think frontline social workers are stuck in between. So it is important to have an appeals board which can assess more objectively. They can come up with a more objective view of the situation after reviewing all the successful as well as rejected cases, and then they can advise the administration. Both the Undersecretary and the Assistant Director have mentioned that NGOs have got an appeal mechanism. In fact, it has nothing to do with the case in question. Now, if in a particular NGO there are colleagues who were rude or who scolded their clients, then clients can complain to this appeals mechanism. But this afternoon we'll talk about CL or CTS. The procedures are established by the government. If there is no appeal mechanism, then it will be the senior supervisors that deal with these complaints. That means they will have a very heavy workload and there is no objective review of cases. So a proper appeal procedure is most important to vindicate cases that have been wrongfully rejected or approved, and their observations can be turned to advice for the governments to amend the guidelines. I hope the administration can respond to this point. And according to the Undersecretary, on average, 40 days are needed. I'd like to know the number of days in the worst case scenario and in the best case scenario. Would it be 2 years as suggested by some of the deputations here? And in the past decade or so, the quota under the scheme has always been 2,000 flats. According to the administration, it is just a reference. More flats can be allocated above that mark. So can it be fixed at, say, 22,000? 2,200? Because when it's close to 2,000, the district officers may sound an alarm. By having a ceiling, then people feel feel threatened, you can fix it at 25,000. So it is between 2,000 and 2,500. And however, by so doing, the alarm will not be sounded so early. And secondly, when there is household splitting, why is the victim asked to stay in the old PRH estate and not in a new one? Perhaps I'll give members the floor to ask questions first before I invite the administration to respond. Ms. Amila, thank you for your comments. I'm sorry I was not in the meeting for a while because we were discussing universal suffrage in another room. Now, I'm very concerned about this subject. Yesterday, there was an event to celebrate Women's Day, and many organizations asked me to follow up on this matter. Now, it is important that there are representatives from ethnic minorities in the working group. The question is how many? Please don't come back and tell us that your answer is no. I fail to see why you have to wait until May. You should have given us an answer today and even yesterday, and you should not discriminate against ethnic minorities. Before I went to Germany, I called the Undersecretary because I received a case about changing flat or address with the housing department. Well, we're not here to discuss cases. I want to give you more real-life examples to arouse public concern. Many people are putting up with such matters silently because they don't want to wash their dirty linen, and because even so there is no assistance for them. All right. Because the SWD is not consistent in its criteria, how come the housing department can deal with it in this manner? Because these are really serious matters, can't they be offered flats earlier? This is a serious matter. The HD should be able to give a more expeditious and comprehensive answer. Right, I'll answer Ms. Samilao's last question. Certainly, we have coordinating mechanism with SWD, and we can offer flats even within 10 days, and we've tried that before. How do you define urgent cases? I'm afraid I think all cases are urgent. Mr. Ng, you're the housing manager. Well, it is for professional social worker of the SWD to define urgent cases. So does that mean that social workers have adopted different standards and they have to refer to the guidelines? It is like cat chasing its tail. So the answer is good. So long as the social worker says yes, HD will allocate a flat at once, although you have a shortage of flats. I hope SWD has heard that answer. And also, Assistant Director, according to Mr. Ng, if you define the case, you call the case as urgent, then immediate flat allocation can be done. Aren't most cases urgent? Mr. Fong, I can't say in general terms what is meant by urgent cases. It depends on the case social worker's judgment, the situation of the applicant and his or her family members, and resources available to him or her. We only write to the housing department when we believe that the case is urgent, so that the housing department knows. So for cases where the situation is really bad, we will let the HD know that it has to be handled at once. But of course, the applicant has to be very cooperative, because she has an urgent need for flat in the choice of location or district. Perhaps she has to be more accommodating. If there is any flats immediately available, then they will have to accept it, because we've seen cases where some applicants refuse to accept flats from certain districts. So we've been asked by the HD, how come cases you called urgent did not sound too urgent? So to put it simply, our social workers will make recommendations. We will let the HD know of the situation. Chairman, you are more professional than I am. From what I heard this afternoon, the HD is most cooperative. Whenever urgent cases are referred to the HD, it would allocate flats. And yet the housing department was not too straightforward in his reply. For me, I think it is important to have flats allocated. Do you think it is funny to allow a victim to stay there and to put up with such beating up? Now we must let them know that we take such matters seriously. Yes, with your assistance. The recommendation can come from a social worker of an integrated family center of the SWT or NGO or child protection unit, or from a medical social worker. All these are mainly social workers. I think the HD is in a passive position. The recommendation has to be made by the district social welfare officer, and usually the HD will not refuse to help. Regarding our previous questions asked at Special FC, code question number 825 by Mr. Zhang Guokqu asked whether there were cases rejected by the HD, even though they were recommended by the SWT for CR or CTS. For instance, in 2013, there were 35 cases rejected under CR and 1 for CTS. So the answer is not 0. So I think the HD has to explain. At the end of the day, we are talking about a few things. First, the whole thing is not transparent enough. Other colleagues or social workers do not know for sure the criteria for approval, because the final power rests with the DO of the SWT, and the quota from the HD is 2,000 flats per year, and I think we suspect, in fact we're quite sure, that the SWT will bear this in mind when the cases get close to the number 2,000, they will call halt to further recommendations. It's been 17 years since the reunification. No matter how much our population has grown, and the number of divorce cases and new arrivals have grown, still the flats allocated under CR or CTS has always been 2,000 odd flats.
Time is up for today's meeting. I don't think we are able to arrive at any specific outcomes, but then for what we talked about last time, well, for the refuge centers, they will only provide for temporary shelter. In the long term, it is hoped that they themselves can resolve the problem, or they can seek a home in the private sector. But some of them need to be allocated a PRH unit, either under compassionate rehousing, conditional tenancy, or household splitting. It seems that the problem hasn't really been resolved, so I suggest to members that we come back at our next meeting to revisit the topic. I think the administration must tell us about the short-term accommodation in the form of shelter as well as long-term housing assistance, namely CR, CT, and HS. The government should come back to us on the schemes again. I recall that last time we were told that there would be some planning to address the overcrowding at the refuge centers. Just a month's time has passed, so maybe you haven't got sufficient time to deal with it, but at least you should tell us about the broad direction. At today's meeting, we still have some outstanding issues. First of all, an independent appeal mechanism. Please go back to study the idea. Second, household splitting. The current policy is such that the victim has to live together with the betterer for a period of time before there is any chance of household splitting. It is very dangerous, as Mr. Chang has pointed out. So you have to address this point. And then thirdly, for conditional tenancy, there were 472 cases in the year 2012. It has come down to 307 in the year 2013. I don't know why the number is decreasing when we see that domestic violence is worsening. For CT, this is most important for conditional tenancy. For compassionate rehousing, it is only available when there is already a divorce. For family or domestic violence, the danger is already imminent and you're not yet able to complete the divorce proceedings, and therefore you have to rely on conditional tenancy, the condition being that you need to get a divorce. So CT should be important. So there's no way that the numbers should decrease. And then for the sexual minorities, they would like to join the working group on combating violence. I hope that you can come back with an answer next month rather than make us wait until May. And then you have the procedural guidelines for CR and CT. I think that document should be made public. I don't know whether I've omitted anything, but at least I've set out the main points that you need to give us a reply. For the ethnic minorities as well as the foreign domestic helpers, I think they also need shelter. I think the administration should also give a reply. For our next meeting, we will follow up on the same topic. For April, we are going to have a meeting on a Monday, the 13th of April, 2:30 p.m. Can you make it? Without you, Emily, we can't show our colors. No. I'm sorry, time is already up for today's meeting. So I've just summarized what has been said at today's meeting. At our next meeting, we welcome deputations to join us again. So meeting adjourned.